her wedding day. A daughter throws her mother's carefully crafted bouquet in her face, screaming that she hates the flowers. What she doesn't know is that hidden among the petals is a small card, a wedding gift giving her ownership of her mother's prized flower shop, a business worth $500,000. Her public act of disrespect is about to become the biggest, most humiliating mistake of her life. Hello and welcome back. This story is a wild one. Before we begin, please show your support by hitting the like button, subscribing to the channel, and clicking the notification bell. And don't forget to tell us in the comments what city or country you're watching from. The scent of 1,000 flowers hung in the air, a perfume I had lived and breathed for over 40 years. Today, however, it smelled different. It smelled like legacy. The wedding reception was in full swing, a beautiful affair at a historic countryside manor. My daughter, Chloe, was a vision in her designer gown, drifting through the crowd of guests like a swan. My heart swelled with a familiar, aching pride. For 40 years, I had poured my soul into Helen's Blooms, my little flower shop that had grown into the most respected florist in the county. And today, on the most important day of her life, I was going to give it all to her. It was my secret, my ultimate gift, the culmination of a lifetime of work, all tied up in a single, perfect bouquet. The bouquet itself was my masterpiece. It wasn't the minimalist bundle of white calla lilies Chloe had pinned to her wedding board. I knew that. Instead, I had crafted something that told a story. It was a cascade of vibrant, fragrant blossoms, deep red roses for enduring love, sprigs of lavender for devotion, myrtle for good luck in marriage, and at its heart, a single, perfect peony, the flower that had been in my own wedding bouquet. It was a legacy of love, a piece of my heart made manifest in petals and stems. Tucked deep within the silk ribbons was a small, elegant envelope. Inside, a simple card and a single, shiny key. The moment came after the main course, during a lull in the music. I picked up the bouquet from the head table where it had been waiting. My hands trembled slightly as I walked towards my daughter, who was holding court with a group of her fashionable friends. "Chloe, sweetheart," I began, my voice thick with emotion. "Your father and I started our life together with nothing but love and a dream. That dream became Helen's Blooms. It's more than a business. It's our family story. And now," I held the bouquet out to her, "I want it to be the start of your story." Chloe turned, and her perfectly made-up face soured as she looked at the bouquet, a look of pure, unadulterated disgust. "What is this?" she asked, her voice a sharp, ugly whisper that cut through the happy chatter around us. "Mom, I told you I wanted calla lilies. Simple, elegant. This is a mess. It's so old-fashioned." Her friends shifted uncomfortably. I felt my smile freeze on my face. "It's symbolic, honey," I tried to explain. "It has flowers from my own wedding."
"I don't care," she snapped, her voice rising. "This is my day, not yours. Why do you always have to make everything about you?" And then she did something that shattered my world into a million pieces. In front of her new husband, her friends, and a dozen other guests who had turned to watch the scene, she took the bouquet from my hands. "I hate these flowers!" she screamed, her face contorted in a mask of childish rage. And with all her strength, she threw it directly at my chest. The bouquet struck me with a soft, yet shockingly forceful thud, the blossoms exploding on impact. Flowers rained down at my feet. A collective gasp went through the crowd. I just stood there, speechless, the scent of crushed roses filling the air, my heart lying broken on the floor amongst the ruined petals. A horrified silence fell over our corner of the room. Chloe stood there, breathing heavily, her face flushed with her own ugly triumph. Her new husband, a timid man named Robert,
rushed to her side, looking mortified. He bent down and began to awkwardly gather the bruised and broken flowers from the floor. As he picked up the main cluster of stems, the small, cream-colored envelope, which had been hidden by the ribbons, detached and fluttered onto the polished wooden floor. Robert picked it up, his brow furrowed in confusion. "Chloe," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "There's a card here. It must have fallen out." He opened the small envelope. His eyes scanned the heavy cardstock inside. Then he looked up, his face as white as a sheet. "Chloe," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "You need to read this, now. I've only just begun this story, but believe me, it's about to get even more intense. Stay tuned to find out what happens when the devastating truth is finally revealed." The silence that fell over our corner of the reception hall was absolute. It was a thick, heavy blanket of collective shock and embarrassment. For a frozen moment, all anyone could do was stare at the carnage of petals and broken stems scattered across the floor at my feet. Chloe, her chest still heaving from her outburst, looked down at the mess with a flicker of what might have been regret, but it was quickly replaced by a defiant glare aimed directly at me. She had drawn her line in the sand. Her new husband, Robert, stood beside her, holding the small, cream-colored card as if it were a live grenade. He seemed to understand, far quicker than my daughter did, that this was no ordinary wedding card. The air crackled with a tension so thick you could taste it.
"What is it?" Chloe snapped, her voice still sharp with irritation. She snatched the card from Robert's hand. I watched her face as she read the words I had so carefully written. I saw her eyes scan the first line, a simple, "For my dearest Chloe, on your wedding day." I saw her brow furrow in confusion as she read the next line, and then I saw the exact moment the world shifted beneath her feet. Her eyes widened, her jaw went slack, and all the color drained from her face, leaving her perfectly applied makeup looking like a garish mask on a statue. She reread the card, her lips moving silently, as if the words were in a foreign language she couldn't comprehend. The card read, "May your life together be as beautiful and full of growth as this business. All my love, Mom. P.S. You are now the sole owner of Helen's Blooms. The key is in the bouquet. The lawyer has the papers." She looked from the card to the ruined flowers on the floor, then up at me. Her expression was a chaotic storm of disbelief, dawning horror, and a sickening, churning realization. "What is this?" she whispered, the word a puff of air. "Is this a joke?" I didn't answer. I just met her gaze, my own expression calm and unreadable, and let the truth of my gift, and her reaction to it, settle upon her with its full, crushing weight. The guests around us began to whisper, sensing a drama far more compelling than the cutting of the cake. Chloe's friends, who had been smirking a moment ago, now looked mortified. The old-fashioned, tacky bouquet she had just thrown in my face wasn't just flowers. It was her future. It was a beloved, profitable business. It was $500,000. Her new husband, Robert, was the first to react. He knelt, his hands frantically searching through the wreckage of the bouquet. After a moment, he found it. A single, small brass key tied with a white silk ribbon. He stood up and held it out, the key glinting under the reception hall's chandeliers. The entire room seemed to be holding its breath. Chloe stared at the key as if it were a venomous insect. The reality of what she had done was crashing down on her with the force of a tidal wave. She had not just insulted me. She had not just thrown a bunch of flowers. In a fit of childish, spoiled rage, in front of everyone who mattered in her life, she had thrown her own future at my feet. The silence was finally broken by my cousin Carol, who had been watching from a nearby table. She stood up and began to applaud, a slow, deliberate clap that was 1,000 times more damning than any insult. "Well, Chloe," she said, her voice carrying across the quiet room, "that's one way to thank your mother for a $500,000 wedding gift." A wave of shocked murmurs rippled through the guests. Chloe flinched as if she'd been slapped.
Her eyes darted around the room, from the pitying faces of her friends to the stunned look on her new husband's face, and finally back to me. The defiant rage was gone, replaced by a desperate, dawning panic. She had made a terrible, terrible mistake, and she had done it on the biggest stage of her life. The sea of whispering guests parted as I turned to leave. Chloe, her face a mask of pale fury and utter humiliation, took a step towards me. "You did this on purpose," she hissed, her voice low and venomous. "You planned this to ruin my wedding day. You wanted me to look like a monster." Her accusation was so ludicrous, so twisted, that all I could do was look at her with a profound and weary sadness. The daughter I had raised, the girl I had taught to be kind and accountable, was gone. In her place was this stranger, a woman so steeped in her own entitlement that she could not comprehend a world where her own actions had consequences. Her new husband, Robert, stood frozen, the single brass key still held loosely in his hand, a look of dawning horror on his face as he got a glimpse of the real woman he had just married. I did not raise my voice. I did not engage with her frantic, blame-shifting delusion. I simply met her furious gaze with a calm she would never understand. "I gave you a gift, Chloe," I said, my voice quiet but carrying in the silent room. "A gift of love and of legacy. Your reaction to that gift was entirely your own. I didn't plan for you to do anything, but you did." I let my eyes drift over the shocked faces of her friends, then to Robert's parents, who looked utterly appalled. And now, everyone has seen it. I looked back at my daughter one last time. "I truly hope you have the wedding day you deserve." With that, I turned my back on her, on the mess she had made, on the whole disastrous affair, and walked out of the reception hall. I did not run. I walked with my head held high, the ghost of a mother leaving the wedding of a daughter I no longer recognized. The drive home was a blur of manicured lawns and stately homes, their perfect facades a mocking contrast to the ruin of my own family. The adrenaline that had carried me through the confrontation began to fade, replaced by a deep, hollow ache. The public nature of it all was what hurt the most. It wasn't just a private argument, it was a spectacle. She hadn't just rejected my gift, she had performed her rejection for an audience. She had taken 40 years of my love and dedication and thrown it on the floor for sport. The vibrant, fragrant bouquet I had so carefully assembled, each flower chosen for its meaning, now seemed like a foolish, sentimental gesture from another lifetime. I had tried to give her a story of love and legacy, and she had turned it into a cheap, ugly drama. When I got home, the silence was a physical presence. I walked through the rooms, my beautiful mother of the bride dress feeling like a costume for a play that had been canceled. I took it off, hung it in the back of my closet, and put on my old, comfortable gardening clothes. I went out into my backyard, my sanctuary, and began to weed my rose bushes with a frantic, focused energy. I pulled at the stubborn roots of dandelions and thistle, channeling all my pain and rage into the simple, brutal act of tearing unwanted things from the earth. I worked until my fingers were sore and my back ached, the sun setting around me in a blaze of indifferent color. As darkness fell, I finally came back inside, my body exhausted but my mind clear. The pain was still there, a hot coal in my chest, but it was now accompanied by a cold, hard clarity. The gift, the flower shop, my life's work. The transfer documents were with my lawyer, waiting for a final signature from me and an acceptance from her. The key was a symbol, but the legal transfer was what mattered. I had intended it as a gift of pure love, given without condition, but my daughter had just shown me, in the most public and humiliating way possible, that she was not worthy of such a gift. She didn't respect the love, so how could she ever be trusted to respect the legacy? I sat at my kitchen table, the same table where Chloe had grown up doing her homework, and stared at the phone. My heart ached for the daughter I had lost, but my head was clear about what I had to do now. This was no longer about a wedding gift. It was about protecting the 40 years of my life's work from the carelessness and cruelty of a spoiled child. My hand was steady as I picked up the phone and dialed a familiar number. It rang twice. "Abernathy and Sons, how can I help you?" a calm voice asked. "Hello," I replied, my own voice even and resolute. "This is Helen Miller. Please connect me to Howard Abernathy's emergency line. I need to put an immediate and indefinite hold on a pending business asset transfer." The days following the wedding were a strange mixture of static and noise. The noise came from my phone, which buzzed with an endless stream of calls and texts from my daughter. After 2 days of me not answering, Chloe's messages morphed from furious, "How could you do this to me?" to vaguely apologetic, "I know I overreacted, but you can't be serious," and finally to desperate, "Mom, please, we need to talk." The static came from my own heart. I felt a profound sense of calm, the kind that comes after a violent storm has passed and leveled everything. The emotional wreckage was all around me, but the wind had stopped howling. I had made my decision, and there was no turning back. On the third day, I finally responded to her barrage of texts with a single, simple message. "Chloe, I am not prepared to discuss this with you personally at this time. If your inquiry is regarding the Helen's Bloom's asset transfer, please direct all communication to my lawyer, Mr. Howard Abernathy. He is fully briefed on the situation." I knew the message would infuriate her. It was cold, formal, and it established a boundary she had never encountered from me before, a professional one. It took less than an hour for Mr. Abernathy's office to call me. "Mrs. Miller," his secretary said, "a Miss Chloe Thompson is on the line. She is quite insistent on scheduling a meeting with you and Mr. Abernathy." We set it for the following afternoon. I saw them from the window of the law firm's conference room, Chloe and her new husband Robert hurrying up the steps. She looked like a thundercloud, her face tight with anger and anxiety. He just looked exhausted, a man caught in a marital storm he had no idea how to navigate. When they were shown into the room, Chloe immediately launched her attack. "Mom, this is insane," she began, ignoring Mr. Abernathy completely. "You're really going to do this? Humiliate me and then try to take away my future over a stupid bouquet of flowers?" I didn't answer. I just looked at her, my expression placid, and gestured for her to sit. Mr. Abernathy cleared his throat, and the sound seemed to command the room. "Miss Thompson," he said, his voice calm and precise. "Let's be clear. This situation is not about flowers. It is about the public and egregious display of disrespect shown to your mother at a moment when she was presenting you with a gift of immense personal and financial value." Chloe started to interrupt, but he held up a hand. "The transfer of Helen's Blooms was intended as a gift predicated on the mutual love and respect inherent in a mother-daughter relationship. Your actions at the reception have, regrettably, called the very foundation of that predicate into question. Therefore, your mother has placed an indefinite hold on the transfer." "So you're just taking it back?" Chloe asked, her voice a mixture of disbelief and fury. This was the moment, the reason I had brought her here. I looked at her, my daughter, a woman who saw a $500,000 business as something that could simply be given or taken away like a toy. She needed to understand what it represented. "No, Chloe," I said, speaking for the first time. "I'm not just taking it back. I am giving you an opportunity to earn it." She stared at me, confused. Mr. Abernathy slid a single sheet of paper across the polished table. "My client," he said, "is prepared to offer you a 1-year probationary employment contract at Helen's Blooms." I watched Chloe's face as she read the offer. "You will begin next Monday as an entry-level associate," I explained calmly. "Your duties will include sweeping the floors, processing online orders, unboxing new shipments of flowers in the cold room, and serving every customer with a smile. You will be paid minimum wage. You will report to the store manager, Mrs. Gable, who will evaluate your performance. You will be treated no differently than any other new hire. I let the words sink in. If, at the end of 1 year, you have demonstrated humility, a genuine work ethic, and a fundamental respect for the business my husband and I built from nothing, I will reconsider the gift. If you quit, or if you are terminated for any reason, the offer is permanently rescinded. Chloe looked up from the paper, her face utterly pale. The offer was a masterstroke, a cage built of her own greed. To refuse it meant definitively losing the business forever. To accept it meant suffering the ultimate humiliation, starting at the very bottom, sweeping the floors of the empire she thought was already hers. Her friends, her new husband, everyone would know. Her eyes darted from me to the contract, then back again. I could see the furious war raging behind them, her spoiled, indignant pride versus her desperate, grasping avarice. She was trapped, and the choice she made next would define the rest of her life. We are on the verge of the climax. What happens now will turn everything upside down. You simply cannot miss the resolution of this story. I watched the war play out on my daughter's face. For a full minute, she just stared at the employment contract, her knuckles white. I could see the indignant fury in her eyes, the sheer, visceral insult of my offer. She, Chloe Thompson, with her designer clothes and her society friends, being asked to sweep floors and dethorn roses like a common laborer. Her pride, a vast and fragile thing, demanded that she spit in my face, tear up the contract, and storm out of the room forever. But I could also see the cold, hard glint of avarice, the frantic calculations of a mind that could not bear to let $500,000 slip through its fingers. In the end, as I knew it would, the greed won. Through gritted teeth, so low it was almost a whisper, she said, "Fine." She snatched the pen from the table, signed the contract with a vicious slash of ink, and threw it back at Mr. Abernathy. "I'll see you on Monday," she said, her voice dripping with venom. And then she and her silent, defeated husband were gone. The first few months were a masterclass in passive aggression. Chloe showed up to work each day dressed in black, as if attending a funeral, her expression sullen and resentful. She was clumsy, careless, and resentful of every task given to her by Mrs. Gable, my tough but fair manager of 30 years. She broke vases. She mixed up orders. She treated customers with a barely concealed air of disdain. Mrs. Gable's daily reports to me were grim. "She has no respect for the flowers, Helen," she'd say over the phone. "She sees them as products, not as living things. She doesn't have the touch." I told her to treat Chloe no differently than anyone else. I knew this was a battle my daughter had to fight with herself. The turning point came on a rainy Tuesday in April. I was in the back office doing paperwork when I heard a commotion out front. Chloe was arguing with an elderly man, a longtime customer who always bought a single yellow rose for his wife's grave every week. He was hard of hearing, and Chloe, in her impatience, was being sharp and condescending with him. I was about to intervene when Mrs. Gable stepped in. She gently guided Chloe to the back room. I couldn't hear what she said, but I saw her gesturing with a forcefulness I had rarely seen. A few minutes later, Chloe emerged, her face pale. She walked over to the old man, took his hand, and led him to the cooler, patiently helping him select the most perfect rose. It was the first time I had ever seen her display an ounce of genuine humility. From that day on, something shifted. It wasn't a dramatic change, but a slow, quiet evolution. Chloe started asking Mrs. Gable questions. She learned the names of the flowers, the way to condition them, the art of balancing a bouquet. She started talking to the customers, hearing their stories of joy, of grief, of love, the stories that are told with flowers every day. She learned the business not from a spreadsheet, but from the soil up. She started coming home with dirt under her fingernails and a look of thoughtful exhaustion on her face. The sullen, resentful girl was slowly being replaced by a capable, hard-working woman. On the final day of her 1-year contract, I walked into the shop unannounced. It was bustling with the Mother's Day rush, and there was Chloe in the center of it all, not just coping, but thriving. She was directing the other employees, creating a stunning arrangement for a demanding customer and calming a frantic father who had forgotten his wife's gift, all at the same time. She moved with a confidence and grace that had nothing to do with her society upbringing and everything to do with a year of hard-earned expertise. She saw me watching, and a small, genuine smile touched her lips. That evening we met in Mr. Abernathy's conference room once more. It was just the two of us. Before I could speak, Chloe looked at me, her eyes clear and direct. "I'm sorry, Mom," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "I'm sorry for that day, and for every day before it that I took you and this business for granted. I never understood what it meant. I never understood what you built, but I do now." The apology was real. It was earned. It was everything I had been waiting a year to hear. I pushed the original transfer documents, which had been sitting in my lawyer's safe for a year, across the table to her, along with a pen. "Helen's Blooms is yours, Chloe," I said. "You've earned it." She took the pen, her hand steady, and signed. Our relationship had been broken, but like a bone, it had healed back stronger. We had lost a year, but we had gained a future, one that was finally built on a foundation of mutual respect.